Hello, welcome to Homegrown Florida. I am Katrina, and today we are going to be making pickles fresh from cucumbers from the garden. So let's head on outside and we are going to grab our cucumbers off our plant and then we'll get started making some pickles. So we've got a few cucumbers on this plant that we want to take off. This one in particular is starting to get a little bit yellow and it's getting a little bit bigger than pickle size, but we're going to go ahead and take this guy off. And I'm going to grab a couple more. My cucumber plant is almost on its way out. It has been definitely ravaged by powdery mildew and other fungal issues, but that's okay. We've gotten plenty of cucumbers from it, enough to make pickles, which is awesome. Usually my husband eats all the cucumbers we get. Now you really only need 1 to 2 cucumbers for 1 pint and maybe 2 or 3 cucumbers for a quart. And we are doing just 1 pint today. So the first step in making pickles is to make your brine. Now I've already pre-made my brine, but all this is 50% water and 50% vinegar. I used a white distilled vinegar, but you can pretty much use any vinegar that you like as long as it's a 5%, which most of them are. And then I added half a tablespoon of salt. I'm only doing 1 jar of pickles today because I did a bunch the other day to test this out just to make sure everything works well. The easiest way to measure out brine, I've found, is actually to put it in the jar that you're going to have it in, and that should give you plenty. And since I'm only doing 1, I only needed 1 jar. So I filled it halfway with water, halfway with vinegar, and then half a tablespoon of salt. So let's get this open. And we're going to pour this into a pot so that it can get hot, because you always want to jar pickles hot. The next step in the process is you want to get your jars sterilized. And the way that I do this actually is, since I'm going to be water bath canning these in this pot right here, it has a base underneath. It's like a trivet that goes on the bottom. It's a rubber one, so I can reuse it on any size pot. You don't want your glass jar to sit in the bottom of the pot because it will cause it to crack. So I just put my jar in my hot water and let my water come up to a boil, and that sterilizes my jars. The next step in the process is I want to pick a pickle that we can use that's going to fit. And so you see this one is a little bit big, but I think this is my smallest one. So we're going to cut the ends of it off because the ends can cause it to become a little bit on the soggy side. And then I'm just cutting it to size to make sure it will actually fit in the jar. And then this one I'm going to cut into spears. And I always like to kind of face them outwards because I think they look pretty in the jar that way. Next step, we want to add all of our seasoning to the jar. So I already mentioned we added salt to the brine that is boiling away on the stove, so we don't need to add any more. I like to use pickle crisp because it does keep the pickles very crisp. I understand that, you know, maybe this isn't available to everyone, or maybe you just don't have it and you can do without it, but it does amazing things to keep your pickles from getting too soggy. So I'm adding 1/8 of a teaspoon of pickle crisp. Then I'm going to add probably 1/8 of a teaspoon of mustard. Then we're going to add a decent amount of dill. These are a sour dill pickle, so they're not a bread and butter or a sweet pickle. And I want that dill flavor to really come through. And then last but not least, you have to have garlic. You have to have garlic. These are pretty tiny garlic, so I'm putting 2, but you would typically just put 1 clove in a pint. I grew these, and they were pretty small. So I end up having to use a lot more in my recipes. And I'm not going to mince them fine. I'm just going to kind of crush them up or break them. And just drop that right in the center. So it looks like our water is just starting to boil, which is perfect. And our brine is definitely all heated up. So we are going to pour the brine into the jar. And you want to leave about a ½ inch of headspace. And then because I packed these in a little tight, I am going to run my little debubbler around just to make sure that there aren't any bubbles. We're going to put our lid on. Fingertip tight. Fingertip tight means that you just put it on tight enough for it to hold it in place without like really cranking it on. Now we're going to put this in the water, the boiling water, and hope that we don't overfill our pot. Oop. That scared me. Okay. Our water is right at the top. So I'm going to cover this and we're going to set the timer for 10 minutes. It's 10 minutes for pints, it's 15 minutes for quarts, and you really want this pot to be really, really boiling. And the reason for that is you don't want those pickles in there any longer than they have to be, because that's what makes them soft. And so if you have your water really boiling and you have everything really hot and you just do it in the brine and then in the pot, you're going to have your best luck for crispy pickles. Also, that pickle crisp will really help that out as well. The fun thing about pickles is that you can really use whatever seasonings you want. So I did a garlic dill pickle, which is one of my favorites. But if you really like the bread and butter pickles, you can definitely add sugar to sweeten it up a little bit. If you like a more spicy pickle, you can add red pepper flakes and chili powder. You can flavor pickles however you want, because the seasoning is pretty much free when it comes to canning. The important part is doing that 50% water to 50% vinegar and water bath, canning it for the time that's associated to its size. So that would be 10 minutes for pints and 15 minutes for quarts. We are just about done. We're in the 30-second mark. Our pickles are now done, so we're going to get them out and set them on a towel to sit for 24 hours. You do not want to touch these. Leave them on the counter, don't mess with them, and just wait to see if they do seal properly. I've never really had a problem with seals, but if it doesn't seal properly, check the tightness of your ring, make sure that your lid is, good and it's not dented or anything like that, and then you can reprocess if it's only been 24 hours. So here's our little pickle jar, and we're just going to wait to see if we get that ping. That means that it's sealed properly, but you're also going to want to test your seal after the 24-hour period. You can do it by unscrewing the ring and kind of lifting up by just the lid to see if it holds in place. There's another way that you can do it where you tap a spoon to see the sound, but you really have to be familiar with what it sounds like to do that method. And then the last type is to press the center of the lid to see if it pops up and down. If it pops up and down, it did not seal properly. If it holds down and it didn't pop down when you pressed it, then it did seal properly. So we're going to leave this guy for 24 hours. I like this recipe because it's really designed for 1 pint jar. And if you're like me and you don't always have an abundance of cucumbers and you just have enough or a couple extra, you can quickly make 1 or 2 pints and get those on the pantry shelf with the little bit of cucumbers you have extra. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Head down to the comments and leave me a note with your favorite pickle recipe.